Hello and welcome to ESG Lifestyle. Today, I wanted to cover the recent interview between Elon Musk and the BBC. This is a great interview where Elon has created his own format. Traditionally, an interviewer like this gentleman, James from the BBC, would have the cards stacked in his favor. So he'd come in and he'd ask questions and have anonymity, not be asked questions himself, but just basically have all the power by the fact that he's able to make excerpts of the interview and only show what he wants to be shown. And they actually discuss this in the interview that large news organizations are able to create narratives in this way. So what Elon has done here is quite smart. He, during the interview, turned on Twitter Spaces and has other people, I'm assuming in Twitter, on the Twitter Space as he's being interviewed by the BBC, effectively interviewing the BBC himself. So this is a different type of dynamic. The interviewer was caught off guard here and was not expected to have to answer questions himself. And Elon's trying to create, in my opinion, a paradigm shift here where the interviewer has to be held accountable for what he says. And it gets pretty spicy, so stick to the end.
Here we go.
Can I join it?
I believe you can.
This is not an interview about the BBC.
Oh, you thought it wasn't?
I see now why you've done Twitter Spaces. I am not a representative of the BBC's editorial policy. I want to make that clear. Let's talk about something else. You want to talk about the BBC? All right, let's talk about something else.
You weren't expecting that.
Why did you agree to do this interview with the BBC?
I don't know. I like spontaneity, and I don't know. There's a lot going on, and it seems like I actually do have a lot of respect for the BBC. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to answer some questions and maybe get some feedback too. What should we be doing different?
First of all, I just want to clear something up. Are you sleeping in the office? Here?
I sometimes sleep in the office.
Like
in the library?
5 days a week?
No.
3 days a week?
I'm not here 5 days a week. But there's a library that nobody goes to on the 7th floor, and there's a couch there, and I sleep there sometimes. I mean, things are going, I think, reasonably well. I mean, we've seen some all-time highs in terms of total user time. So we passed 8 billion user minutes per day, which is a lot of user minutes. So usage is up, growth is good, the site works mostly. We have a few glitches here and there, but the site is working fairly well. And we're doing it with a small fraction of the original, headcount. So,
I mean, you mentioned outages there. There have been several. Yeah. And we've actually spoken to an engineer who works at Twitter, and they said that the plumbing is broken here and it's on fire and there could be problems at any minute. Do you accept that?
I mean, there have been a few outages, but not for very long, and it's currently working fine.
Do you accept that there are lots of engineers that are looking at the way that Twitter is built and the lack of engineers, because so many have left, and are worried about the health of Twitter?
Well, I mean, there've been many of these people have predicted that Twitter will cease to function. Their predictions have not turned out to be true. I mean, we're literally on Twitter right now.
Right.
So it must work.
Let's go back 6 months and even further back than that. When you put that initial bid in, you then had a wobble. You kind of said, I actually don't want to buy Twitter anymore.
No, I mean, it really is quite entertaining. I mean, it's like soap opera, because when I first made the offer, the response was the board adopted a poison pill. So they were like, hell no, you can't buy Twitter. We'd rather die. We'd like chew on cyanide before being bought. That was their initial response.
And then, and then you said, actually, I don't want to buy it.
Yes,
So
and then they said, no, you must buy us. Gun to the head, you have to buy us. I'm like, are you the same people who said you'd rather die than be bored? Doesn't that seem odd?
So I guess my question.
Yeah, no. The problem was that the publicly stated user numbers were in excess of the real user numbers.
I've heard you talk about that.
Yes,
you
yes.
Talk about that.
Yes.
Basically, looking back at it now, was that the only reason that you wanted to pull out?
Yes. That was literally the issue. It's like let's say you buy a warehouse full of goods, and you're told that less than 5% of the goods in the warehouse are broken, you know. But then you actually get the warehouse. You look into the warehouse, and it turns out actually 25% of the things are broken. You'd be like, that's not what you said.
So then you changed your mind again and decided to buy it. Did you do that?
I kind of had to.
Right. Did you do that because you thought that a court would make you do that?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that is the reason.
Right. So you were still trying to get out of it, and then you just were advised by lawyers, look, you're going to have to buy this.
Yes.
Interesting. So you.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually want to purchase it, even when you said you were going.
Well, not at that price.
You were going to.
Twitter was tracking to lose over $3 billion a year. And had $1 billion in the bank. So that's 4 months to death. So this is your starting position. How would you feel? Pretty intense, you know.
You also had to borrow quite a lot of money and pay interest on that too.
Well, that's why part of why it was a $3 billion run rate. So, in rough numbers, a normal year, Twitter would do, let's say, $4.5 billion in revenue, $4.5 billion in cost. I mean, it was really kind of like a non-profit. They'd run it at roughly break even. Now,
but that's not a bank. That's not bankruptcy. You're not saving that company from bankruptcy. No, it's breaking even.
But then the issue is that if you then add $1.5 billion in debt servicing, and have a massive drop in revenue, which we did, which was partly cyclic and partly, political concerns and whatever. So revenue, call it dropped by over a third. It's not, and this is not just Twitter. Facebook and Google have also seen some significant advertising revenue declines. It's been a little higher at Twitter, but most of the advertisers are coming back. So I think we'll be back where there's a cyclic demand drop, which is still pretty significant. But in rough numbers, revenue dropped from $4.5 billion to $3 billion, and expenses went from $4.5 billion to $6 billion, creating a $3 billion negative cash flow situation, and Twitter having $1 billion in the bank. That's 4 months to live. So unless drastic action was taken immediately, this company's going to die and be owned by banks.
Let's talk about that drastic action, because almost immediately you sacked a lot of Twitter workers. And I spoke to them. It was very easy to speak to them when it happened. And the way they said, pretty much everyone said, is that it felt quite haphazard.
It was.
And it felt a little bit uncaring.
I wouldn't say uncaring. The issue is like the company's either going to go bankrupt, or if we do not cut costs immediately, this is not a caring, uncaring situation. It's like if the whole ship sinks, then nobody's got a job. Right. Yeah.
But a lot of people just lost their jobs like that. You're framing it in a way that it had a few months to live. You're quite a rich man.
I sold a lot of Tesla stock to close this deal. I did not want to sell the Tesla stock.
Okay. Do you think you prioritize freedom of speech over misinformation and hate speech?
Well, who's to say that something is misinformation? Who's the arbiter of that? Is it the BBC?
You're literally asking me?
Yes.
Well, no, you are the arbiter on Twitter, because you own Twitter.
Yes, I'm saying who is to say that one person's misinformation is another person's information? the point at which you said that there is this is misinformation. Like, who is going to decide that?
You accept that misinformation can be dangerous, that it can cause real-world harms, that it can potentially cause.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that the BBC itself has, at times, published things that are false. Do you agree that that has occurred?
I'm quite sure the BBC have said things before that turn out to not be true.
Correct.
In its, whatever it is, 100-year history, I'm quite sure.
Yes. Even if you aspire to be accurate, there are times when you will not be.
I mean, I guess taking your argument to a logical conclusion then, do you accept that there's more misinformation on the platform if it's not being policed in the same way?
I actually think there's less these days because we've eliminated so many of the bots which were pushing scams and spam. And previous management turned a blind eye to the bots because their bonuses were tied to user growth. And if your compensation is tied to user growth, well, you're not going to look too closely at some of the users. That's part of the problem. So I think we've got less misinformation because we don't have the bot problem that we used to do. And we also have given a lot of attention to community notes, which corrects, with community itself, corrects misinformation. It's been very effective.
I would only just add that we have spoken to people who have been sacked that used to be in content moderation, and we've spoken to people very recently who were involved in moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
what hate
that
speech are you talking about? I mean, you use Twitter,
right?
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
but just a personal anecdote. Like, what do you? I don't.
Personally, for you, I would see I get more of that kind of content. Yeah, personally, but I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
So you see more hate speech personally?
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content, and I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
you
don't.
Can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you
said a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second. You said you've seen more
feed.
hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed...
You just lied.
What I claimed was there are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not... I mean, right, and
literally
if you look at something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
Wow.
COVID misinformation. You changed the COVID misinformation.
Has
rules.
BBC changed its COVID misinformation?
This is not an interview about the BBC.
Oh, you thought it wasn't?
And I see now why you've done Twitter Spaces. I am not a representative of the BBC's editorial policy. I want to make that clear. Let's talk about something else. You want to talk about the BBC?
You too.
All right, let's talk about something else.
You weren't expecting that.
Let's talk about something else.